Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. This is Friday, the 19th day of May, in the year of our Lord 2023. I will be talking about the report that the nation has waited 4 years for Special Counsel John Durham to deliver. The report confirms something I've been arguing for many years now. That is, that everything in government is corrupt and not to be trusted. The U.S. government has been taken over and destroyed by its ruling elite, which is destructive of the Constitution and destructive of even the idea of America. The idea of America, the idea held by the founders and by the U.S. government throughout much of its existence, is that instead of being subjects to royal or imperial power, people in America could run their own lives and govern themselves. The Durham report revealed that to no longer be the case. In America, the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice colluded with the Hillary Clinton campaign to rig the 2016 presidential election, and apparently CIA operatives working illegally within the United States managed it all. The report, consisting of 316 pages, reveals incontrovertible proof that federal law enforcement was weaponized to shield the Hillary Clinton campaign and persecute the campaign of Donald Trump. You might be surprised to learn as well that the CIA, prevented by law from acting within the United States, was nevertheless also involved in the chicanery. That shouldn't surprise anyone, since the CIA is involved in rigging elections and financing coups all over the world. It's only natural it should also interject its massive funding and manpower into rigging American elections as well. Yes, we are supposed to be a country based on principles, not one based on brute force and mafia-like corruption. Power corrupts the mind and the morals, and humans have proven throughout history they will find a way to cheat. The idea of America was to leave choices up to the people. Who would occupy the White House? Well, that was up to the people to decide. The laws, rules, and regulations to govern would be decided by the people through their own representatives. No king, no emperor would tell them what flag they would fly. The people would be free to decide for themselves. No one with a royal title, no one called your excellency, no one called your lordship would ever rule over them. No one had to bend his knee to those he elected to govern for him. Americans could hold their heads up individually and collectively because they walk proud, they walk free. If there were stupid, nonsensical government decisions to be made, they would be able to make them all by themselves. In the case in point, things were made to happen outside the will of the people, to subvert their will, take away their right to decide their own government stupidity from them. How were they to know, since they trusted the most honored FBI agents, whom they knew risked their very lives to protect them from very bad people? How were they to know the very mysterious CIA was doing in their own country? How could they know that Hillary Clinton was conspiring with all those organizations and people to rig the 2016 presidential election? Cheating in a baseball game was a scandal, but conspiring to steal a presidential election and subvert the will of the people was unthinkable. This view, the real view, reality, is so offensive to many people they refuse to accept it. The government, after all, is benign, impartial, looking out for all of us. Certainly no one in my political party would ever do such a thing. Many people lived and grew up in small towns where people knew each other, trusted each other. Democrats and Republicans worked side by side in the factories and in the fields. They argued about politics, they argued about baseball, but how could they even imagine the whole thing was a rigged game, a fool's game, and they were the fools. They have now found out the hard way that the real government is just corrupt and conniving as any rigged card game. The ones ruling over them are no different from the tyrants who have stolen from and robbed the people of this world for centuries. Yes, human nature is desperately wicked, the Bible tells us, and that wickedness is manifested most clearly when humans have a little taste of power over other humans. Considering all that, this has happened recently in America. In light of this report, it's difficult to understand how any American who clings to a semblance of rationality can believe one word that comes from Washington or its federal agencies or law enforcement. They are very familiar to the West German Stasi, trying to keep their people in the dark, keep them obedient in behavior, lest they see the light creeping from under the door. The actions of Hillary Clinton and the FBI in 2016, Mr. Durham referred to as, quote, sobering, and they displayed a, quote, lack of fidelity. Senator Mike Lee, Republican from Utah, said the report exposed, quote, a breathtakingly corrupt FBI that is subversive of the Constitution, end quote. The gravity of the misconduct exposed by Mr. Durham cannot be overstated. The senator went on to say that. Let that statement sink in for a moment and realize that a U.S. senator charged with investigating this matter said after looking at it that there is no way, regardless of how hard he tried, he could overstate the gravity of it. In other words, this is bad because it undermines the very integrity, the very sanctity of government for Americans. It is destructive of the very idea I mentioned earlier in this report. Americans were being deceived into bending their knees not for a king, but for an unelected bureaucratic shadow government. It lowers America to the level of a second or even third-rate banana republic like the fictitious Latin American nation in the Woody Allen comedy Bananas. Hillary, the FBI, the CIA, their deep state cohorts helped make America into something that should be embarrassed to criticize anyone. I suppose the difference between America and the nation in the Bananas movie is aircraft carriers and nuclear weapons. The deep state and its minions wanted their candidate to win, as their candidate had always done. Hillary was their candidate, this time their chosen one. A member of their deep state family, she was the chosen head of a separate nation of those in government like her, kept there by people like her, and of course with the full power of state media. Does this sound familiar, folks? Because it is the same scene played out in communist countries since Lenin and Stalin came to power in Soviet Russia. No wonder they seemed to hate Russia so badly. The deep state was very happy to abide by the will of the people as long as the people had the same will it did. Donald Trump, however, was out there, and it did not look like he was one of them. It appeared he didn't know enough about politics to even know who they were, but they must have suspected that he had some naive plan to represent the people instead of them. That could not be tolerated, so they set about to do him in, using Russia as the scapegoat. The Russiagate hoax are the charge that Trump was somehow under the influence of Russia. Making him a Russian agent was formulated in the minds of evil people without one shred of evidence that it was true. The FBI went abroad and tried to get the UK to support them in stealing the election for Hillary, but to their credit, the British said no thanks. The FBI did finally get several British and Russian agents to cooperate and help them fabricate the lie for the fabricated Steele dossier naming Trump as Russian agent. The FBI paid $1 million of your money. The interesting thing is that the FBI had evidence and discovered evidence as their agents traveled around the world fabricating the lie that their own sources, the sources they were paying all that money to, were in fact Russian agents. As Senator Lee also said in his analysis, quote, the least one can say of it is that it involved a malicious use of federal law enforcement officers to conduct a contrived investigation utterly lacking any valid factual foundation from the very beginning. That is itself incredibly troubling, also unconstitutional, end quote. It was so much worse than that, Senator Lee went on to say. The ramifications of the report showed a powerful, long-respected federal law enforcement agency used its power to render a presidential candidate unelectable entirely in the absence of any valid good faith basis for doing so, end quote. He also pointed out that there's no innocent explanation. Quote, so make no mistake, this can't be dismissed as mere carelessness or even a severe example of garden variety misconduct. No, this is corrupt and as subversive of the Constitution as it gets, end quote. The plan to steal the presidency could not have been formulated without the knowledge and cooperation of President Obama, Vice President Biden, their inner circle, and the federal agencies over which they had responsibility. They all bought it, apparently voiced no objection, so the plan to defeat and demonize a presidential candidate, thereby steal the presidency for a woman corrupt enough to do that. Didn't work this time. Didn't work this time. The team, however, stayed in place, planned how it would ruin Trump's presidency and his life through fabricating lies, the vilest sort of accusations through their state media and their control of social media. Having seen this report, no American should ever believe one word coming from the FBI, the CIA, or the Biden administration, or any other agency under that administration's control. The failed impeachment charges, the false narrative insurrection charges, the document charges, the fake George Soros New York prosecutor charges, the false rape charges, all just vile lies dreamed up in the wicked minds of some of the most evil people in this world. This means we can never, in good conscience, say anything bad about the leaders of other nations again, because it would just amount to the pot calling the kettle black. There are no more evil Russians, no more evil Chinese communists. The plan to steal the presidency continued into the 2020 election, in part by coercing 51 retired intelligence officials to lie in writing about first son Hunter Biden's laptop and say that it was not valid but was Russian disinformation. That fraud alone, coming just before the election, could have made the difference. Hunter and the entire Biden family created a whole new set of problems for the FBI and the CIA. The Bidens were rather open about their graft and their corruption through Hunter's rather public life. Wasn't Hunter afraid that his habits would unravel the entire scheme? No, folks, no, that's the point. If you want to get angry about something other than what I've already told you, get angry because the vaunted American justice system has been subverted by these people. No longer is there a rule of law in America. No longer are we a nation of laws and not of men. Now we are a nation that applies the law harshly to political enemies and not at all to others. If you're not a woke Democrat, you're accused in New York City or the surrounding jurisdiction, you might as well plead guilty. No evidence, no problem for a New York prosecutor. How can America survive with such people, with people like these, when their legal systems can constantly mount false charges against their enemies for the sole purpose of subverting the will of the people and keeping evil in power? It's clear. This means, even if I'm the only one who will admit it, there was a massive effort to steal the 2016 presidential election. When that effort failed, the thieves learned, and they succeeded in 2020. Power has been stolen from the people and delivered to an evil cabal. Finally, folks, how much more ruin can this country take? I've heard it said that every problem is an opportunity in disguise. What is the opportunity that this problem disguises? This is a chance, maybe just the last one, to clean up this mess that has been made of America and return it to the idea I mentioned earlier. How do we do that? Well, we charge every one of them, put them on trial somewhere other than in New York City. And if convicted, we send them to jail. What are the chances of doing that in this political climate with control by those who should be in jail? Well, don't hold your breath, folks. At least that's the way I see it. Until next time, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.